It was a bright summer morning, August 14, 2005. Helios Airways Flight 522 prepared for takeoff from Larnaca, Cyprus, heading toward Athens, Greece. Inside the Boeing 737, everything seemed routine. 115 passengers, families, tourists, and crew fastened their seatbelts. But hidden deep within the cockpit, one small mistake was about to change everything. The pilots ran through their pre-flight checks. Everything looked normal. But there was one setting, one tiny switch, left in the wrong position after maintenance. A switch that controlled the cabin's pressurization system. No one noticed. Not the engineers, not the captain, not even the co-pilot. As the engines roared to life and the plane climbed into the sky, the fate of everyone on board was sealed. Within minutes, oxygen levels inside the cabin began to fall. Passengers started feeling lightheaded. The pilots grew disoriented. Yet, to the air traffic controllers below, the flight appeared perfectly normal. No one realized this plane was already turning into a ghost ship, flying on autopilot higher and higher, while everyone inside slowly lost consciousness. But how could one tiny switch, no bigger than your thumb, bring down a jet full of people? To understand, we have to go back to what happened before takeoff, inside the Helios maintenance hangar. 2 days before the flight, Helios engineers performed a routine pressurization test. To run it, they had to manually change the system's mode, from auto to manual. It was a simple task, done hundreds of times before, but after the test, someone forgot to switch it back. When the plane was cleared for takeoff, the cabin pressurization system was still set to manual, meaning it wouldn't automatically maintain safe oxygen levels at high altitude. The maintenance logs didn't mention the switch. The pilots didn't notice it either. During pre-flight checks, they saw the panel lights glowing normally. Everything seemed fine. At 9:07 a.m., Flight 522 lifted off. It was climbing perfectly, until 12,000 feet when an alarm began to scream inside the cockpit. A piercing horn echoed, the same sound that usually warns of a takeoff configuration problem. The pilots thought it was that, not a pressurization failure. They radioed Helios operations, confused, searching for answers as their oxygen levels began to drop. But every second counted, and they were running out of time. The alarm was blaring, but the crew didn't know why. They had only minutes before the lack of oxygen would take control. And soon, the pilots themselves would become victims of the very machine they trusted. At 10,000 feet, the cockpit grew colder. The co-pilot's breathing became shallow, his voice faint over the radio. The captain, confused, tried to troubleshoot, but his vision blurred. They didn't realize they were suffocating. The warning horn kept screaming. Lights blinked across the panel. Air traffic control tried to contact them, no response. Inside the passenger cabin, oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Children cried. People gasped for air, but soon even that sound faded. The plane continued to climb to 34,000 feet or on autopilot. Everyone inside was unconscious. The Boeing 737 flew straight toward Athens, perfectly level, guided by its computers. From the ground, it looked normal, a routine flight cruising through clear skies. But in reality, it had become a flying tomb. For more than an hour, Flight 522 flew on, with no one alive to control it, until, suddenly, a fighter jet appeared beside it, revealing a chilling truth that froze everyone on the ground. Greek air defense had scrambled 2 F-16s to intercept the unresponsive aircraft. As they approached, the pilots saw something terrifying. The cockpit windows were frosted over. Inside, both Helios pilots were motionless, masks hanging, heads slumped forward. In the passenger cabin, dozens of people sat still, unmoving. The fighter pilot radioed, "The aircraft appears to be on autopilot. I see no movement inside." Then, a miracle. Someone appeared in the cockpit, a man wearing an oxygen mask struggling to control the plane. It was flight attendant Andreas Prodromou, one of the few who regained consciousness long enough to try and save everyone. He fought to take control, waving desperately to the F-16 pilots, signaling distress. But the engines were already failing. The fuel was nearly gone. At 12:04 p.m., Helios Flight 522 began its final descent. With almost no fuel left, the engines began to die. The flight attendant fought until the very end, but what happened next would become one of aviation's most haunting moments ever recorded. At 12:04 p.m., the first engine failed. Moments later, the second followed. The plane began to lose altitude rapidly, descending over the hills of Grammatico, near Athens. Inside the cockpit, Andreas struggled to keep control, his oxygen mask fogging, alarms blaring, the yoke trembling in his hands. He tried one last time to save the flight. But the Boeing 737, now gliding silently, could no longer stay airborne. Witnesses on the ground saw the aircraft spiraling gently before crashing into the hillside. At 12:05 p.m., the impact shook the valley. There were no survivors. The investigation would later reveal what caused it all: a single switch left in the wrong mode. A mistake so small yet powerful enough to end 121 lives. But the story of Helios 522 didn't end with the crash. Its aftermath would forever change aviation safety and remind the world how one forgotten detail can destroy everything. Emergency teams raced toward the hills of Grammatico, about 25 miles north of Athens. What they found was horrifying. The Boeing 737 had disintegrated upon impact. Flames and debris scattered across olive fields. Rescue workers combed through the wreckage. 181 souls, gone in an instant. Among them were children, families, and crew members who had no idea what went wrong. But amid the twisted metal, investigators noticed something unusual. The cockpit's pressurization switch, set firmly to manual. It was the clue that would unravel the entire mystery. News of the crash spread across Europe. For many, it was unthinkable. How could a modern jet simply fall from the sky without a single distress call? The truth, however, was far more tragic. It wasn't a mechanical failure, but human error. One small oversight during a maintenance check had set off a chain reaction that no one could stop. At first, no one could believe it, that a single forgotten switch caused so much death. But as investigators pieced the evidence together, they uncovered shocking truths about what really happened inside the cockpit. Greek and Cypriot aviation authorities, alongside Boeing engineers, launched a full-scale investigation. They recovered the black boxes, the flight data recorder, and the cockpit voice recorder. What they heard was chilling. In the final minutes before the pilots lost consciousness, you could hear confusion, alarms, and fading voices. The captain repeatedly asked, "Where is the cooling circuit breaker?" He believed it was an air conditioning problem, not a pressurization issue. The investigators quickly realized that the same warning horn that signals a takeoff problem also sounds for cabin pressure loss. That design flaw, combined with the manual switch, doomed the flight. The maintenance crew had set the switch to manual for testing and forgot to return it to auto. During pre-flight checks, the pilots didn't notice because the indicator light seemed normal. One tiny toggle had turned into a death sentence. When the final cockpit recording ended, investigators sat in silence. But what they discovered next exposed an even deeper issue, one that would force the entire aviation industry to change. The Helios 522 tragedy sent shockwaves through global aviation. Airlines and regulators around the world reviewed their safety checklists, warning systems, and crew training protocols. Boeing issued urgent advisories to all 737 operators, clarifying how the pressurization alarm worked. They also redesigned procedures to prevent the same confusion ever happening again. Helios Airways, however, faced intense scrutiny. Public outrage grew. Families demanded answers, blaming the airline for poor maintenance and lack of training. The Greek government charged several Helios executives with criminal negligence. But beyond legal consequences, the disaster became a symbol, a chilling reminder of how fragile human systems can be. It wasn't the technology that failed. It was trust. Trust that someone somewhere would double-check. Even after reforms, one question remained: how could such a small detail slip past so many eyes? To answer that, we must look at the human cost behind those 121 names. In the months following the crash, grief swept across Cyprus and Greece. Memorials were built, candles lit, and photos placed along the crash site hillside. Families spoke of lost children, young couples, and crew members who died doing their duty. Among them was flight attendant Andreas Prodromou, remembered as a hero. His final act, trying to regain control, became a symbol of courage under impossible odds. Many passengers were returning home from summer vacations. They had no warning, no chance to say goodbye. The tragedy united two nations in mourning. Every anniversary since, flowers are laid where the Boeing 737 fell, a silent reminder of the cost of human error. Today, every time a pilot flips a switch, checks a system, or hears a cockpit alarm, they're reminded of Helios 522. Its story is taught in aviation schools, studied in safety courses, and remembered by every engineer who signs off a maintenance sheet, because one wrong switch, one moment of human forgetfulness, changed aviation forever. Helios 522 became more than a tragedy. It became a lesson written in blood, the lesson that in aviation, no detail is small, no step is unimportant, and no warning should ever be ignored. As the sun sets over the hills of Grammatico, the wind still whispers through the olive trees, and if you listen closely, you might hear the echo of a jet that flew itself, a ghost of the sky that taught humanity never to forget. The crash of Helios 522 wasn't just a story of failure, it was a warning to the world. Because sometimes it takes just one forgotten switch to change everything.